All right, folks, we are live. Thanks everybody for hopping on. I'm gonna get started here in a minute or two because I got started a little bit early, so I just want to make sure everybody can hop on. Hope everybody's having a good Wednesday. Certainly looking forward to today's topic. And when we talk about benchmarks, it always seems to be a hot topic, right? We kind of want to know, what are those industry benchmarks? What are other schools doing? What should we be doing? How do our numbers stack up against others? So we're going to get into a lot of benchmarks today. And as I was putting together today's presentation or the live stream, there were so many data points. I could probably be here for an hour plus. Will spare you that time, and maybe we'll only be here, 15, 20 minutes or so max. But we might likely have multiple sessions here talking about different benchmarks related to different areas of marketing, different areas of admissions. But yeah, let me just double check that. So my one platform is saying that I'm live. Okay, yep, we're good. We are live. Great. I'm using this fancy new streaming software. Everybody knows I love software. That's why I started a software company. But it's called Restream. It's to do these live sessions like this, and you can post it to YouTube and all the other channels. Haven't even ventured down that path yet. But anyway, um, it's a really cool tool to use. If you want to do videos and webinars and things like that, Restream is pretty cool. All right, folks. Why don't we get started? And by getting started, that means I'm going to share my screen here. Let's get these words off the screen. Let's hide that. Great. Let me share my screen. So bear with me, everybody. All right, you should be seeing my screen. I'm going to remove my face so that you can see more of the screen. All right, awesome. So as I said, benchmarks, right? We're going to be talking about benchmarks. And I want to mention two things first about benchmarks. One is we're going to be going through some industry averages today, right? Now, industry averages are good. They might help you determine, am I on the right path? Are my numbers good, not so good? So it gives you at least a starting point to start analyzing some of your data, your marketing data, your admissions data. Ultimately, at the end of the day, what you want to have is really be benchmarking against yourself, right? So when we look at some admissions data, I'm going to share with you some admissions conversion data that comes from NAIS. That's across all of their schools. Boarding schools in the Northeast might have different, or your boarding school might have different metrics than a Montessori school, right? Just different types of schools, different types of benchmarks, and in terms of how that's going to play out. So at the end of the day, what you're going to want to do is start benchmarking against yourself, and I'll highlight that as we're going through today. But just wanted to keep that in mind. So if we're looking at some numbers, you're like, hey, our numbers are way beyond that, or maybe they're a little bit lower. What really matters at the end of the day is that you look at your data. How are your numbers comparing to last year or the last 5 years averages? Right. So that's the big takeaway. But with that being said, why don't we dive in? Let's just start hopping right in and talking about benchmarks. So we're going to talk about some admissions benchmarks and some marketing benchmarks. All right. Here we go. So, we talk about admissions. Let's talk about this first one, which is admissions conversion rates. And by admissions conversion rates, what I'm talking about here is to have a family go from, let's say, inquiry to application, application to acceptance, acceptance to enrollment. Now, I completely understand you're going to have probably stages in between there, right? But those are the core 4 stages, and I'm pulling the data. What I'm going to share with you, it's from NAIS. It's their facts at a glance for the most recent year. So this is where you can get their data, and let's share with what they're showing us here. So conversion rate. So you have some inquiries coming in. What they're showing is that on average across all their schools in their system is that to go from inquiry to application, it's a 47.6% conversion rate. And then to go from applications to accepted, 65%, and then accepted to enrolled, 71%. All right. So again, that's good to know. So because if you're looking at your data and you say, okay, we're getting a lot of inquiries, we don't seem to be getting a lot of applications, or we're not getting. Let's just say you're getting a lot of inquiries, but maybe we're not hitting our enrollment numbers. The first thing you might want to do is take a look at your funnel and say, hey, are we, is there a bottleneck somewhere? Are we at a shortfall in any one of these areas? So, like for example, if you look at your inquiries and then your inquiry to application rate is 25%, okay, that's probably an indication that it's a little bit low compared to industry average. What I would then say is, hey, go back over your past 5 years, and those COVID years tend to skew the data. But look back as far as you can and look at what your average rates are. Now, maybe your average conversion rates are 25%. You're like, okay, we're at an average conversion rate, but let your data tell you that. So you can extrapolate that out through each one of those stages of those core 4 stages. So go look at your funnel. I'll just share some example numbers. This is inside our AIMS platform. This is part of our CRM. But if you look at inquiries, tours, applications, so you might have tours in there, right, as a stage between inquiries and applications. And what this is showing is the next step conversion from inquiry to tours, about 76%, tours to applications is 77%. But if you really wanted to compare apples to apples, we want to look at how many inquiries resulted in applications. So we had 46 inquiries, we had 27 applications. Little back of the napkin math tells us that's it's about 58%, I believe, at 58%. So in that case, probably doing, at least against industry benchmarks, you're doing well. I would then want to compare that to my, last year's data, year prior to that, and see how those numbers are shaking out. And again, you can do that for all the different stages of your admissions funnel. All right. So that is admissions data. And again, you can go right to NAIS, their 2024 facts at a glance, to get this data, as well as a lot of other data points that you can take a look at as well that we're not necessarily going to cover today, but there's a ton of information in there. All right, next, let's talk about social media engagement and frequency. This is a question I get. Excuse me. This is a question I get a lot, which is how often should we be posting? What are the platforms that provide the most engagement, right? I know for many of us, right, Facebook, Instagram, they're going to be your 2 primary platforms. I was, again, looking at some industry averages, and I think maybe you'll be surprised, maybe you won't. I don't know. In terms of what platform right now is getting the most engagement, which I know probably 90% of schools aren't even utilizing. Now, maybe you could start guessing where I'm headed with this, but this is very interesting. So here we go. So let's focus on the left-hand side first, and that is education industry engagement benchmarks. So first is they're looking at what's the average engagement rate per platform, and they're looking at Facebook, Instagram, and also TikTok. Take a look at those TikTok numbers. There's a 4.9% engagement rate. Now you might wonder, okay, what does that mean? How does that compare? Now, first, what they're doing is engagement means likes, shares, comments, right? So of all the people that view it, 4.9% of them are engaging. But how does that compare? If you look here, it might be a little bit small, but the Instagram engagement rate is 1.4%. The Facebook engagement rate is 0.1%. I thought that was really interesting. That engagement rate is super low. Now, again, just from anecdotally, from looking, working with a lot of schools and seeing a lot of their data, I'm certainly always seeing that Instagram engagement rates are higher than Facebook. You're probably certainly seeing the same. But even though compared to 2020, take a look at 2022, engagement rates were through the roof for TikTok, for the education industry, and obviously they've been coming down from there. That is certainly not sustainable. But it brings in the question, right? If you're not using TikTok, should you start using TikTok? Some schools are for it, some schools are against it. That's certainly an internal conversation for you to have. But it's at least interesting to hear, if you're having that conversation, you're open to it. At least the data is showing, like, hey, if you're posting there, you're probably going to get a decent amount of engagement. So again, a couple ways to post there. You can just simply, if you're creating Instagram Reels, for example, you can share those over to TikTok and post them there as well. I've mentioned this before, if you've been on some webinars of mine in the past, that there's schools that I've seen create TikTok clubs where the students are creating the content and the TikToks essentially. And obviously there's supervision there that it posts on the school page. Another great way to get student involvement. You don't have to create it yourself. But yeah, some really interesting data there. Now, again, that doesn't mean I wouldn't post on Facebook. I would absolutely continue to be posting on Facebook. At the very least, you should be cross-posting between Instagram and Facebook. Facebook, I mean, they're aware, of what's going on in the social world. They're aware their average age of the user is increasing. They're actually trying to bring that down and they're making efforts. So, don't just say, well, we're not going to get a lot of engagement there, so we shouldn't post there. It still has the most users of anybody. So don't look at this data and say, well, hey, I don't need to post on Facebook. You absolutely should. All right. Now, on the right-hand side here, let's talk about posting frequency. Now, this is, again, just an industry average number. And what it's saying is that, on average, schools are posting 21 times per month when you look at Facebook and Instagram. It's pretty good. Again, I've always said good rule of thumb is try to do a post a day per platform. So 30, 31 times a month, that kind of keeps you in the mix and keeps you visible. So I would look at this and say, if you're doing less than that, just understand that your competitors are probably posting more. By posting more, they're a little bit more visible. And that when you add that up over the course of a year, that could be thousands, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of impressions you're missing out on. If you're posting 10, 15 times a month versus another school down the street that's posting 30 plus times a month, that's a lot of engagement. That's a lot of impressions, a lot of eyeballs that you're potentially missing out on. All right. So use that as a benchmark. If you're not near 21 right now, okay, how do we go from 10 to 15, 15 to 20? And if you're at 20, how do we get to 25? How do we get to 30? Right? You might want to use like a social media posting platform. Again, I know there's the Hootsuites, the Buffers, and the Laters out there. Again, we've built that into our software platform, so you don't have to worry about buying another piece of software. We've built it in so you can do your posting from there. But yeah, so some really interesting social media metrics there regarding the engagement rate and the posting frequency. All right. Just double checking we're good on, see if I have any questions. Don't see any questions, so let's keep on rolling along. Cool. Oh, I left the slide in. Let's skip those. I combined the slides. I was going to keep them separate, but I combined them. All right, let's talk about advertising now. I've been posting a lot about ads lately. My most recent live stream from earlier in the week was all about avoiding wasted ad spend. Understanding benchmarks is another way to avoid wasted ad spend. You can understand very quickly what's working, what isn't, how do I do more of what's working and less of what isn't. So it's good to know what are some average benchmarks that you should be hitting or somewhere close to give you an idea of how well your ads are performing and what potentially might need to be improved. So let's talk about Google advertising first. Again, let me give you some general numbers. So the two of the core numbers that you're always going to see on any advertising dashboard is what is the click-through rate and how much did it cost you per click. First is let's talk about click-through rate, 6%. 6% is about the industry average for schools across the globe, or across the country, I should say. And one thing I want to mention before diving into that number a little bit further is you'll see a little asterisk there that says unbranded keywords. What do I mean by that? I was once talking with a school, and when I was sharing this data, like, hey, look at our metrics. Our click-through rate, it was like 12% plus. It's like, wow, that is fantastic. And so I wanted to take a closer look. What are the keywords? What were the ads? And what I found was they were also paying for their school name keywords, right? So think about your school name. If you pay for your school name, naturally that's going to have a very high click-through rate. Their click-through rate was like over 20% for their school name. Now, I'll repeat, I've said this many times, but I'll repeat it again because I think it bears repeating. Be careful about paying for branded keywords, your school name keywords, so that you show up at the top when somebody types in your name. If you Google, should I pay for branded keywords? The answer is usually going to be yes, but it doesn't work well for the education industry. It works well if you have a pizza shop or a restaurant or a plumbing business, right? You want to be at the top. But with schools, you have something very unique, and that is existing families. What you will find is that if you pay for your keyword, your existing families will type in your school and click on the first search result in Google, and that means you're paying every time a current family clicks on your ad. Be very careful of that. You will have great metrics because your current families are clicking through, so they'll be through the roof. That doesn't mean that you're paying for the right people. So the only time I would ever pay for unbranded keywords is if you type in your school name and either somebody else is advertising against you or you don't show up at the top of Google for whatever reason when somebody types in your school name. Maybe you have a very generic name, right? Um, and you type that in, and another company or institution shows up ahead of you. Okay, might be worth paying for it, but let's bring it back to the metrics here. Unbranded keywords, not including your school name, you should hopefully see about a 6% click-through rate. Again, average. Look at your own data, look at your own metrics. If you're not hitting 6%, fine. Let's say you're at 5% across your ads. That's your benchmark now. How do you beat 5%? Now your goal is to beat 5%, but this at least brings you brings your focus into what your numbers should be around. And then cost per click. Again, $2.97 on average cost per click. I have seen schools in the dollar range. I've seen schools in the $10 per click range. It can vary widely. It can vary based upon how well, frankly, Google likes your ad, their quality score that they give you. So if you're not using proper landing pages and things like that, it can negatively affect your cost. It's also a direct factor of competition. Are you competing against other schools that are bidding on the same keywords, private schools near me or whatever it might be? If you're in a highly competitive area, your cost per click might be higher. So again, this is a benchmark. It's good to know this. Look at your own data and then try to improve upon what your own data is saying through your own A/B testing. In the previous live stream that I did on how to avoid wasted ad spend, you can refer back to that where I gave you some ideas about how to improve your ads in general. And a lot of that has to do with testing, A/B testing, different variations of copy and creative. You always want to be testing to see what image, or at least in the case of Google Ads, which what words are going to help you. Okay, so those are Google ad metrics. Let's hop over to Meta. I'll give you the same speech that I just gave you, which is it can vary widely from school to school, area to area. I will say if you're outside the United States, I've seen I ran an ad for a school in El Salvador one time, and the cost per click was 2 cents. Okay, so I would say these are United States numbers. Um, if you're outside the U.S., you're probably going to have some of your own data to compare against. But click-through rate around 1% is a good metric to hit. Again, I will say if you're running an open house campaign that has a date associated with it, you're probably going to see a higher click-through rate. If you're running a campaign that's about scheduled tours, right, that doesn't have a date associated with it, usually a little bit more difficult to get somebody to commit to a tour from a Facebook or Instagram ad. So you might see numbers a little bit below that. So it is dependent upon what your call to action is. And you might have an ad that says, hey, read our most recent blog post. You might see click-through rates of 3, 4, 5% because all you're asking somebody to do is read a blog post and not necessarily commit to an action. And then again, cost per click, 97 cents. I've seen campaigns that are in the 20 cents, 30 cents range in the US. I know I mentioned just the ones that were for a couple cents, but I've even seen as low as 20 to 30 cents. I've seen those types of really great cost per click numbers when we're using some AI that's involved for doing a lot of testing, a lot of variations, and using first party data. Again, please refer back to my previous live stream talking about first party data. where you're sending back data to Facebook about who's on your website, who's filling out forms, things like that. So, but again, decent benchmarks to go by. Take a look at your own ad campaigns, see how well this is doing. And again, I would look at this as full-blown ad campaigns, not necessarily boosting posts to your existing audience. Those metrics are probably going to should be a well better than what you're looking at here. If you're just boosting to your own audience, this is you're using the ads manager and building your ad campaign. All right, let's move on. Let's talk now about again. So again, how do you use this data? And I'm just use this as an example of how I would start using this data for your campaign. So, for example, let's say you are running a campaign and you're using an ad, you build a landing page, you want people to inquire, maybe then visit your school for a personal tour, and then enroll. Again, please excuse, I know there's probably stages in between there, they're not exactly the same. But what you want to do is kind of lay out your process and then start putting your numbers against benchmarks in here, right? So if you have your ad and with your offer, which your offer is, hey, come to our open house. And then let's say your click-through rate on Facebook is well below 1% and your cost per click is $1.50, $2. Okay, you might then have an advertising problem. And then moving forward, though, if from the landing page you have a low inquiry percentage, right, then you might have a landing page problem where you're getting people to hit the landing page, but if they're converting at less than, let's say, 2%, your landing page might need to be improved. If you're looking for folks to visit your school that have inquired and it's less than 50%, that might be an indication like, hey, maybe we have to follow up better, follow up quicker, send more reminders, whatever it might be. And then obviously enrollment. And we looked at some of those enrollment numbers from NAIS. So you can lay out your full process and put those numbers in there and start seeing, hey, where do we have a bottleneck? Right? Where are the numbers that we really need to improve? And the other way to look at this is like, say everything looks great. Like, say you're hitting your benchmarks or improve or beyond your benchmarks, your admissions funnel data looks great, you're a 50%, 60% conversion rate from stage to stage, and you're still saying, hey, we need more enrollment, we need to fill more seats. Then you have an easy solution now by knowing these benchmarks. Now you can say, hey, we just need more top of the funnel inquiries. And what does that mean? Well, maybe we need to run ads. Maybe we need to find other channels to bring in families because we know the rest of our process is really great. It's airtight. Then you just have a traffic issue. But if you have issues with your landing page or your conversions from inquiries to visits, then you might have what we call like a conversion problem or a follow-up problem. All right. Actually, I think that is it. Those slides are from another presentation that I apparently didn't remove from. What I'm going to do right now is let me share my screen. Say, all right, well, here we are. Cool. So again, hopefully that data was helpful to understand some of those benchmarks, especially if you're running ads, you're looking at your admissions funnel data. If you want to talk about this further, or if you want to see, how our platform will help you improve these areas, like for example, the ad platform that we have, which is an AI-powered platform, we've seen ad costs now, cost per click, decrease by up to 90%. That's pretty high of a decrease, which is phenomenal, but it can decrease 20%, 30% because it's really optimizing your campaigns without a lot of the AI platforms are smarter than us when it's doing analyzing of data. So whether it's looking at your ads campaign or looking at your funnel data, this is what our software platform was built to help you do: consolidate software, improve those metrics, and see all of that data from the first moment that somebody connects with you all the way to enrollment. And you can kind of see all the stages and the conversion rates and what were the marketing efforts that led to those results as well. So I'm using my fancy little ticker here at the bottom of the screen. So if you want to learn more about how software platform AIMS can help you improve this data and visualize this data a little bit clearer, go to getaims.co/demo. and be happy to connect with you and talk you through it. So, with that being said, I think that's it for right now, folks. Again, thanks for joining me for today's live stream. If you missed it prior inside the Facebook group, you'll see there was a previous live stream on avoiding wasting money with your ads, avoiding wasted ad spend. Soon, I will be putting these videos on the website as well. I'm going to building out what I'm calling the learning center there. So there's going to be tons of resources on the website that is coming. So this will also live there as well. But for now, I know we have another live stream here coming up in a few days. Let me see. I already forget what that one is. 3 ways to attract middle school families. I was drawing a blank on what that was. Yeah, so coming up in a few days, or depending upon when you're watching this, maybe it's multiple days, many days from now, you'll find a recording about if you're looking to attract middle school families, right? Where it's families that would likely have to switch schools. How do you get somebody to do that? We're going to talk about some data that you need to be aware of, and some strategies about how to actually execute on that and attract families to your school, especially in those middle school years where you may not have a feeder school sending folks to you in those sixth, seventh, eighth grade years. All right. Well, thanks, folks. Thanks for joining me. I'll see you inside the Facebook group. See you on the next live stream. Take care.